Hello, Jo here from Minerva. Welcome back to our Back to Basics series. 10 episodes showing you how to sew right from scratch all the way to a sew along project at the end. Today it's episode 4 and we're going to be taking a look at our sewing machine, how to thread it, how to avoid some errors and how to know all the parts and how each part works. Of course, all sewing machines are different. It will depend which one you have, but most of them have common sewing parts and also a common way to thread them up. It would help if you had your sewing machine manual to hand so that you could double check anything that's slightly different to mine. If you don't have the sewing machine manual for your machine because it was given to you or it's one from quite a while ago, you could check out the serial number online and see if you can download the manual. If you look after your sewing machine and you know how it works, then you've probably got a higher chance of it not going wrong when you're sewing, so you'll get a higher success rate during your projects. Let's take a look at some parts of your sewing machine. All sewing machines will act with 2 threads, so you'll have a thread on the top, which is on your thread spool, and this thread will make a lock stitch with the thread that is wound onto a bobbin spool that goes into the bottom, and both threads will work together to make a stitch that doesn't move. If you hand stitch, your stitch can pull along, but with a machine stitch it locks together, making a lock stitch. This is where your thread will stay when you're sewing. This is for winding your bobbin, and it goes in the on position to wind and in the off position to sew. This is my tension disc, so I normally keep it on 4. Try not to mess with the tension. Sometimes people immediately think if their sewing machine's not sewing very well, there's something wrong with the tension. It tends to be something wrong somewhere else. So try and keep the tension on 4 if you can. You very rarely need to take it one way or the other. On the end of your machine, you'll have the hand wheel. The hand wheel will manually make a stitch, so you will see the needle going up and down when you turn the hand wheel. It's useful for starting your sewing and for ending your sewing, and also for turning a corner. You've got your on-off switch. I've got some different stitches to select. This is my stitch selector, so I can choose different stitches from this tab here. You might have a stitch selector that's on a dial, so there's pictures all the way around the dial of all the different stitches that you can choose. I have a digital machine, so I can adjust my stitch length here. You will have a dial on your machine somewhere which is stitch length, and it's really worth finding out which one that is. Don't confuse it with your tension one that has numbers on. Look for the one that has a zigzag stitch normally underneath it as a little image, and it shows the zigzag very small, and then it gets wider and wider and wider. If you're sewing a straight stitch, you won't need to change the stitch width, but stitch length you might need to change because you might need a stitch that's temporary or a stitch that's permanent. So find out if you can change stitch width. Find your wheel or button for stitch length. On this machine, I've got a speed button. That's not on every machine. Some machines are just operated with speed on the foot pedal. I have a backward stitch so that I can go forwards and backwards. Sometimes it will be a lever here, or sometimes it will be somewhere else on the right hand side where you can do your forwards and back. This is really important because little back tacks at the beginning and the end of a seam will stop your stitch line coming undone. In here is the bobbin case, so the bobbin will go inside this little space here. You might have a front loading bobbin, but everything that I show you will be quite similar. Let's have a look at threading a bobbin. You need to put your thread onto your top loading spool. Mine's got a little plastic disc that goes on the end, and my thread is running from the bottom of the spool. If your spool stands up, then your thread runs from the back of the spool. And quite often, if you've got a modern machine, there'll be few little diagrams, numbered sometimes, or as images that show you where your thread goes. Mine goes round here, through this tension disc here, And this here is a little disc, and you can feel if your thread is running between the two tension discs, because you'll have a little bit of tension on it. If it's just pulling through, then it's not through there properly. So just make sure from either side that your thread is running through. Just check you have the right bobbins for your machine. They're not all the same. You can buy them in packs, but just check that your machine is compatible with the bobbins in the pack. My brother one has some that are slightly smaller. Put your thread through the little holes in the top of the bobbin. And the reason you do this is so that you don't have two threads coming off your bobbin when you've finished winding it. So you put the bobbin on the bobbin holder and you click it into the on position. So that means it's going to thread your bobbin. Have it nice and taut to start. If it's baggy, it all gets knotted around here. And you might need to change your hand wheel to make sure that it's not going to sew at the same time. Once you've threaded it through the top of the spool, you turn it into the on position, in this case to the right, and most of them to the right. And you need to check on your hand wheel whether you need to turn it from sewing to threading the bobbin. Start getting your bobbin going. Once you've got it going, you can cut that little thread off, and that's keeping the one end on the inside of the spool, and it won't just spin out, and you won't catch the beginning of the thread rather than the end of the thread when you're threading your machine. The thread will go up and down naturally so that you get an evenly wound bobbin. And you keep doing that until it's full, and you know it's full because this little bit here will touch the threads when the spool is full. Turn your bobbin to the off position and take it off. Just wind that last bit around, and that's your bobbin ready to put into the bobbin case. Just a little did you know, on the end of your Gutterman threads is a number, and that's the number if you need to get the same colour thread again. So now we're going to thread the needle and all of the top of the machine. So again, the thread comes from the bottom of the spool, and this time we're going to go in an up and down motion, and that's the same for most machines. So I'm going to take it through here, down that split. There's a tension disc in there, so just make sure you've got a little bit of tension on that. Round the bottom, up to the top, and then we're looking for that little lever. And when the needle's in the up position, the lever is in the up position. Mine doesn't pop right out. You might get to see yours there. So it's going from the spool, down, up, through the take-up lever, and then back down to the bottom of the machine, towards the needle. When you get towards the bottom, there's a little hook here. I'm going to hook my thread around there, so that guides the thread towards the needle. I'm going to have my needle in the up position. I'm going to put the foot down. When the foot's down, it locks the tension discs near the take-up lever, so you can't pull your thread easily now. If you want to draw through more thread, you need to lift the foot and then drop it down to give yourself a little bit more space. Thread your needle, taking the thread out to the left. Try not to let this twist around. I don't even know if I can show you so much, but sometimes if it flicks under the point of the needle, you think you've got it going to the left, but you've made a tiny little knot. Can you see that there? I've got a tiny bit of thread and it's not coming through very well. So just make sure that it comes through that bar and to the left. Now this thread needs to go through your foot and remain at the back. To put your bobbin in, you need your bobbin thread to be working out to the left. So that means that my bobbin is turning anti-clockwise. I'm going to drop that into the bobbin case, and now I'm going to put the thread around a little clip inside there. I've got a little arrow actually that's showing me, but you are going to be putting it through a little metal clip on the inside, and you know you've put it in the bobbin tension disc because there's a little bit of tension on there. If you put it in and you pull it and it's just scooting out the side, you haven't quite got it in the tension disc. So this is pulling really smoothly but with a little bit of tension. So you've got the upper thread threaded, you've got the bobbin threaded, and now we need the 2 stitches to be able to lock. Use your hand wheel to turn the needle 1 complete revolution, and it pulls up the thread from the bobbin. You can just use the end of your scissors or pick a needle or a pin to pull the bobbin thread up onto the foot plate. Now both threads are pulling with tension out the back of the machine, and you can put the bobbin cover back on top. That's the same. If you've got a front loading bobbin, you'll have a bobbin holder like this. Your bobbin thread still needs to come out to the left. You put the bobbin into the bobbin holder, and you'll be looking for a little split in the bobbin case. It goes through there and behind a little clip. This is like a curved piece of metal here, and when you pull your thread it should be under a little bit of tension. You can use the little spring to hold your bobbin holder, and then that drops into the bobbin case. You would do 1 turn of the wheel, the same as we did here, and that will pull the thread up through the foot plate. It's always good once you've rethreaded your machine and changed the bobbin to do a line of straight stitch to check that you've got your threads through all of the tension discs. You've got your bobbin in the right way, you've threaded your needle correctly, you're taking your thread through the tension discs here and the tension in the bobbin. And you can try your line of stitching. You can also peel it open and just check that you're getting a good tension. If the threads are pulling here too much and you're seeing too much of the threads, you might need to change your tension disc just by 1 little move. I've got it on 4 and I'm just going to take it just 1 past 4. I'm going to try a zigzag. And tried a few different widths. And a few different lengths. To check that I'm getting an even stitch on the front and the reverse. If you're getting a good looking stitch on the top but on the back it's very loopy, you might need to change your tension a little bit, but only a tiny bit, like 1 move to one direction and 1 move to the other. You can also refer to your manual. Other things you might do to get your machine in good order and to make sure that it's sewing really well is to make sure it's got a new needle in it, especially if it's a machine that nobody's touched for years and years or one that somebody's given you. put in a new needle. It will make such a difference. When it's sharp, it will cut through the fabric really nicely. It'll puncture it. The thread from the top will be able to go through the fabric easily and pick up the thread at the bottom. If the needle's blunt, then it pushes bits of threads into the foot plate, and it also doesn't go through fast enough for the bobbin thread to be picked up by the upper thread. So get yourself a new needle. Also, depending on what fabric you're using, I wish someone had told me this when I first started sewing, that there are different needles for different types of fabric. But while you're learning, you'll need a needle that says number 80. Spend some time with your sewing machine. Just have a go at making little strips, testing out the different stitches. I've got quite a few stitches on mine, but you might just want to make sure that you can get a zigzag right, you can get a straight stitch right, and make sure that you're getting good tension on the front and the back. When you check your fabric, you should be getting a really nice stitch that doesn't pull through too much to the right side. This might take a little bit of time. Put some music on, have a cup of tea, and try and take your time to get to know your machine. If you're getting cross and angry, it's time to walk away. If you're having some real problems with your sewing machine, then do refer back to your sewing machine manual, or maybe if it's a machine that hasn't been used for a really long time, it might need a sewing machine service. I hope today has inspired you to get your sewing machine out, see if it still works, get a little bit of fabric just to practice underneath, and do join us again for episode 5, where we will be looking at sewing some different stitches on your machine. Thank you very much for watching. See you all again soon.